Welcome into the Tottenham Depot podcast, the YouTube page here. Follow us at youtube.com/Tottenham Depot. We are here to preview the Everton match. I've got Scott alongside. He is at Scott G. Bird. Scott, weren't able to join the regular pod this week, but we've got you for the preview. I've managed to wrangle you. What's going on, my friend?
Chilling, man. Probably good that I got 24 hours to cool my jets a little bit before I talked about the 1-1 draw at Leicester City. But yeah, always stoked to be on the show and talk to you and all of that. So doing well.
And we have got a new face alongside. We've got James from the from the American Toffee Podcast at USA Toffee Pod is where you can follow them. James, what's going on, man? Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Excited to chop it up, talk a little bit of a little preview for the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. We are looking forward to that. Let's dive right in. I know Everton finished 15th last season, had that point deduction. It's been topsy-turvy for the club. I'm sure you're going to be really excited to tell us about all of that. But take us first through kind of what the summer's been like as an Everton fan. I know things are not all rosy, but what about the transfer market? How have things gone for the Toffees in the summer market so far?
So I think in context, it's been a pretty successful window so far, though we haven't quite addressed some of the more glaring holes in the team. I think Jake O'Brien, brought in from Lyon, is a really good young center back who's going to help us out quite a bit. Partner up, hopefully, eventually with Jared Branthwaite, as James Tarkowski is kind of getting on in years. So we'll see how that develops. Ilman Njai from Marseille is another one from Liga, who I think is going to be a really good fit for us and really affect and probably get a lot of minutes in that kind of second striker, not quite number 10 type role behind whoever we have up front. So he's, I think, going to be a really dynamic signing. He was really good for Sheffield a couple of years ago in the Prem, for those who might remember. Jesper Lindstrom's another one, Napoli, loanee for the season. Just basically pace and kind of dynamism on the wings, which we have definitely lacked with Jack Harrison, who's returned on loan again from Leeds, and Dwight McNeil. So we got a couple different wide options, better attacking options overall, I'd say. And the main departure has really been Amadou Onana, who, of course, left in kind of a big move to Aston Villa. He's an amazing player, and I think he's going to be unbelievable in an Emery system. But I don't know that he was the best fit for what Everton are trying to do in terms of not really possessing the ball quite as much. He'll do a lot better in a possession-based side, but unbelievable athlete. And fortunately, midfield is kind of where we have the most depth, so his departure doesn't quite hurt as much. That said, I think the most glaring hole that we probably talk about on every single episode of our podcast is right back. We do not have a right back. If you watched last weekend, we started 39-year-old Ashley Young. We have a 35-year-old Seamus Coleman, who is our quote-unquote first choice. And then we have a young kid out of Scotland, Nathan Patterson, who really hasn't really seemed to have been able to break through into the team, which has a lot of people scratching their heads. But I also just think he's not really a great fit for what Sean Dyche wants from his outside defenders. So I would say that overall, the window has been pretty positive. We haven't had many moves lately. If we get a right back, I think I'd probably upgrade it to like a B plus. Right now, it's probably sitting at like a CC plus overall.
And so let's talk about that opener a little bit, because a 3-0 defeat to Brighton, as you mentioned, Ashley Young sent off. What went wrong? Because I know Brighton are a strong side. It's not, it's no shame in suffering defeat to Brighton, but what exactly went wrong in match week 1 for Everton to lead to that defeat? And obviously being a man down can't help.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't. I don't think that was the reason we lost. It's probably the reason they scored the third goal, was because we were down a man and had to make some shape changes that really disrupted anything we were able to do tactically, as it tends to do. I would say the first goal was just a really clinical counter. They broke us down really quickly with pace. They've got a lot better players than us at almost every single position. We had this conversation on our post-match. I think maybe one player from our starting 11 gets into their starting 11 that they played on the day, and they have like 6 or 7 guys who are still injured that could come into their team. So there's just a huge gulf in quality. I think that's it's almost as simple as that. But the second goal, what really killed the game was Adrissagana Gay just got kind of lazy and made a poor pass in midfield, short pass that Brighton were able to jump on and really quickly kind of cut us open, get the second goal. And then the red card, like 2 minutes after that, really just made it almost impossible for us to get anything out of the game. So again, it's early days in the season. I'm not reading too much into any individual result or loss, especially because we only saw one new guy start for Everton, one new signing, and that's Tim-Eric Bunum, who is kind of not expected to contribute that much this year. He's still a young kid. We signed him from Villa, and he was actually probably our best player on the day. So if anything, I'm taking some encouragement from that. And as the newer guys get integrated into the side, we have that pace out wide. We can hit teams more quickly on the counter. I'll feel a little bit better about our prospects.
I want to ask about Sean Dyche. I mean, the other thing you talked to earlier about, the window and not wanting to play certain players because of the style that he wants to play. Well, what exactly is Everton style? What are they trying to do? And do you think that he is going to have the type of players? I mean, I know that there's still another 10 or so days left in the window. Is he going to have the types of players to be able to play that style, or is more going to need to be done to reinforce what exactly he wants to do with, as you mentioned, kind of just not having as much of the ball?
Yeah, so mostly what Sean Dyche wants to do with the ball is just be very direct. He doesn't care very much about players trying to beat guys one-on-one, especially in the midfield or further up the pitch. Once you get into the final third, yeah, you want guys to swing crosses in, take on a man from the wide areas, try to disrupt the defense. But I think it's pretty simple, and I think he has a bit of a reputation that maybe he's earned, maybe he hasn't. But with the ball, it's going to be very direct. You're going to try to a lot of times bypass the midfield, play really quick through the lines, get the ball forward, and get it into the box. On defense, I think he does get boxed in a little bit, because I think people don't really realize that Everton actually pressed sort of aggressively a lot of the time last year. Nothing all out gegenpress, anything insane, but it's not this like pack it in, sit super deep, and necessarily hit on the counter. Certain games that might be appropriate to do, and he has found success doing that, but that's not necessarily the style week in, week out. We did see, especially against Brighton, before we were a goal down when the game was still level, a pretty aggressive press from the midfield and the forward players in a really high line, really, which Brighton eventually were able to exploit. So I would say that's kind of the main characteristics, is a semi-aggressive press off the ball, and then just go pretty direct once you get possession. Look for Dominic Calvert-Lewin up top. Hopefully he can win a ball and find the second pass, and then we go, basically, is how it typically ends up.
It's certainly doable. We saw Jamie Vardy do it to great effect, of course, in Spurs opening match against Leicester City. What about just the zooming out a little bit, like the club itself? I know it's probably a topic that you guys discuss a lot on your podcast, but just the turmoil with, ownership, obviously a new stadium being built. How is all of that kind of going? And is it causing the same amount of stress that it did when Spurs were building a stadium a few seasons ago, and they went through just, frankly, I mean, Scott, you could chime in here. Like, that was a nightmare for Spurs, like trying to do business and be pragmatic to an extent, but also while you're building a new stadium, it's just like, it kind of becomes a lot, right? Like,
It does. It does become a lot. The fan base is affected by what that becomes, and that leads to toxicity. And we're coming from a place of privilege, Andrew. We had European revenue coming in, right? We are not in a situation where we were battling relegation as we were going through all of that, right? So, I think Everton will figure it out, and I have a lot of belief in Everton, right? But yeah, the challenges are only magnified with the situation up in Everton as compared to what it was at Spurs, but it's a challenge.
Yeah, I think there's really no question about it. I think the main thing for Everton is that our current owner is essentially desperate to sell. He does not want to own Everton. He does not want to be involved in anything to do with the club. At the same time, Everton are in a really difficult position because he has not been able to fund the club in the way that owners of Premier League clubs typically do. As a result, we have had to take on a lot of debt to fund the day-to-day operations of the club, and a ton of debt to finance the stadium. And the difficult thing is we've now had a couple of prospective ownership groups come in and enter periods of exclusivity with Farhad Moshiri, saying we want to move forward, and both have fallen apart in one way or another. Originally, it was 777 Partners, which is a group out of Miami, and their whole company literally imploded. They're getting sued left and right. They're getting evicted from their offices. They're going bankrupt. Basically, that was a total shell game, Ponzi scheme, fraud, which gives you an idea of like the type of people that Farhad Moshiri tries to deal with, because he released multiple statements saying these guys are the best future owners of the club, blah, 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 them to the hilt. And then the whole thing crumbled. Next was a guy named Dan Friedkin, who is a business owner. He owns AS Roma out of Italy, and is actually an American guy out of Texas. He owns a bunch of car dealerships, and they entered a period of exclusivity with the club, and then they backed out. So they must have seen the books or seen something once they really got kind of in the weeds and realized we can't make this work. The question is, Farhad Moshiri still is the owner. He's still on the hook for all of the liabilities, and his equity becomes worth less and less every single day. So eventually he's going to have to realize maybe you're not going to get as much for the club as you in your head think you should, and you sell. And I really think ultimately the source of all of Everton's problems stem from Farhad Moshiri. Since he took ownership of the club, he splashed cash left and right. He did not do so in an intelligent or coherent way. He pretty much has brought the club from competing on the fringes of Europe, definitely top half, 6, 7, 8, 9, year after year, pretty consistently, to where we are today, which is struggling to avoid relegation. And the stadium has added a lot of pressure to that. But I also think it's kind of the light at the end of the tunnel for a lot of Everton fans, because if we can get this guy out of here, which every single fan wants him gone, if we can get a new owner who's willing to invest in the club and try to get Everton back to where most fans would say they should be given their history, we have a brand new stadium we're going into, which will generate revenue for the club. It will be a huge attraction, upstaging our neighbors a little bit, which I'm sure they're not super thrilled by, which we don't really care too much about. But it's going to be a beautiful stadium. I was there last year when it was still kind of, it's much closer to being finished now, and it's just unbelievable. Just seeing it from the outside, it's going to be one of the premier stadiums on the continent, to be honest. So I really think it's get rid of Farhad, get a new owner in willing to invest, and then as we're doing that, get into the new stadium, and the sky's the limit.
Is there any concern, James, around what potential acquisition or new ownership looks like? And really what I ask is, I think it's dangerous right now when you start to talk about who could come in and take over the club. I think about all the negative publicity around the Newcastle United purchase. I think about Todd Bowley at Chelsea and the absolute dumpster fire that has been, right? So obviously acquisition needs to happen, and I very much get the sense that is Everton's path forward. But when it comes to the temperature or climate around what fans want that to look like, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I do. It's a good question. I think the fact of the matter is it can obviously always get worse, but it really realistically cannot get much worse than Farhad Moshiri. And I mean that sincerely. You had this guy who tried to commit to this director of football model with Everton, which was something they never had in place, and then would repeatedly just liaise with agents and make signings and go over the guy who he put in charge of the football's head. This and furthermore, just splash cash on players who were utterly useless. So it could, of course, get worse. We could get there's definitely people out there who are worse than Farhad Moshiri, but they are few and far between. I genuinely believe that even a small improvement on Farhad would be a huge win for us. And so the concerns are kind of alleviated. Now, if like a nation state comes in, something like Newcastle that you alluded to, obviously that's going to have, that can get kind of touchy, kind of sensitive. But ultimately, like Everton fans are so starved for success that I think there's a willingness to look past a lot of that stuff. And frankly, like, I mean, you look at Man City, like there's plenty of other clubs that have looked the other way in terms of like people acquiring their club who may not be on the up and up. And honestly, you get to, enough billionaires. There aren't a ton of guys who are like happy, super nice, friendly. It's generally pretty cutthroat to get all the way to the top.
For sure. I mean, I think there's even American owners who people would give a heavy pass to that have done some questionable things, right? I understand. And I also think, from the Spurs perspective, there's been talks about nation state takeovers. And I think we're all pretty vehemently like, no, not interested in that. But I think it's important to point out we are coming from a place of a little bit more privilege, right? Where we do have aspirations and hopes of actually winning things in the near future and not having battled relegation. And I think the more you suffer and watch your team again saved themselves on the last couple of days of the season from going down. Perspective and angles look a little bit different than it does from competing for, again, top 4 or beyond, right? So I get that.
James, I want to get you out of here on a little bit of a personal one and a weird one. Is there any latest? I almost said what's the latest, but is there any latest when it comes to our good friend Dele Alli and a potential return? I know that there's been a lot of noise and not a lot of substance on the field for Dele Alli in the past few seasons, but the latest I read was that he's perhaps going to be getting a trial and maybe try to make a comeback from all these injuries that he's dealt with. Have you heard anything? Is there any desire for that from the Everton fan base?
I mean, I think given what the guy's gone through on a personal level, everyone has sort of an empathetic eye for or feelings toward him. Like, I want him to succeed as a person. I would be completely shocked if it's in an Everton shirt. I just don't see the path for it, unfortunately. My impression of what's gone on with all of the, he's going to be given a trial and whatnot, is that my theory here, and I don't really have any evidence to back this up, but it's that I think Sean Dyche actually thinks that he can get a tune out of him, but the football people, the recruitment team and whatnot, don't really think that. So Sean Dyche is like, just give him let me give him a go. Let me kick the tires on him, see what I can do. And the football people are like, he's been here for 3 years. He hasn't played since we survived relegation 2 years ago against Palace, and he came on in the second half and he played really well. That's his only contribution in an Everton shirt to date.
Yeah.
So it just seems kind of unlikely, unfortunately. I'd love to see it because I think he could be a good fit in the team if he can put it all together, but I just don't think it's realistic.
Yeah, trust me, there's no one that wears a lily white shirt that wouldn't like to see it as well, even if it was at Everton or anywhere else. That's for sure. All right, really last one. I said that was the last one, but this is really the last one. I know we're only one match into the season, but how much fear is there? Any fear, and if so, how much of an actual relegation for Everton this year? Because I think they're better than that, but obviously with everything that went on last year and there was a scare. Is there that fear? Is there that danger there that the bottom could fall out? Because especially on the verge of moving into a new stadium, that would just be pretty harsh. And I'm not trying to harsh your mellow or anything by saying this, but is there actual fear there?
Yeah, I mean, I think every new season, every fan base goes in with kind of a maybe unrealistic level of optimism. That said, I think the seasons of recent past have definitely given a lot of Everton fans a dose of reality. There are the odd ones that will say we should be finishing in the top half comfortably with this squad. I don't think that's the case. I do think Sean Dyche is the guy who can steer us to safety. If we didn't have the points deduction last year, we would have been comfortably safe with weeks to go. So for me, it's always a fear because injuries happen. We go on a terrible run. We went 14 games last year without a win. That was pretty diabolical. But I do think the newly promoted teams are not going to be that great over the course of the season. And I think that gives us a little bit of a cushion. And I do think as a squad, as a whole, we are improved from what we had last year in terms of personnel. So always a fear, but it's not like a red alarm fire, let's panic yet. If we get to Christmas and we're rock bottom, obviously things change. But I feel confident that we will at least match our points total from last year, if not improve on it.
I hear that. Just be weary of a lurking Jamie Vardy because from those newly promoted sides that can hurt you. James, let our viewers and listeners know where they can find you guys if they want to learn more about Everton. You guys are doing it every week. I know it's at USA Toffee Pod for your socials for the podcast, right?
That's right. Yeah, at USA Toffee Pod, Facebook, X, Instagram, Threads. You can follow me at Optimum Velocity. The O is a 0, the first O. You can find all of our co-hosts, and you can find us wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. American Toffee Podcast is the name. Definitely check us out. I know probably if you guys beat us this weekend, you can come listen to us complain and break down the loss. And if we win, well, maybe you might not want to listen to that because there might be some gloating going on. But
you'd be surprised how many Spurs fans love pain. I mean, if it is a defeat, there may be some people popping over there just to experience it over again. So who knows?
But yeah, that's just about it from me.
Awesome, James. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll send you on your way. I'm going to hold Scott hostage here for a little while longer, and Thanks for doing it, man. Maybe we'll talk to you again in January when these two teams hook up again.
Yeah, sounds good, guys. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thank you, James. Great meeting you.
Yeah, good luck on Saturday.
Cheers, man.
Cheers. You too.
Cheers.
All right, Scott. You did not get to have your say on the Leicester result. After we did the pod, you weren't able to join, unfortunately, but I've got you here now, and I just want to wrangle your kind of quick thoughts to get them to our YouTube audience exclusively. So how do you break that one down, man? That was we talked about it on the podcast, but I know you were a little bit more on the pessimistic side, kind of like I was. When I talked to Todd and Caroline, they were a little more optimistic. But do you want to take anyone to task for what we saw at the King Power Stadium on Monday?
Yeah, man, I'm frustrated. I wore red today to tell Spurs to kiss my ass, metaphorically. But yeah, I'm frustrated, and
Just to be clear, that's an Iowa State shirt you have on. It's not an Arsenal shirt.
Yeah,
you're an Iowa boy through and through. I just want to make sure
let's make
everyone
that clear.
knows that.
I know Caroline thought this was a Liverpool kit at one point when I had this shirt on. So no, I'll flash my camera down. This is Iowa State women's basketball. Go Clones. Definitely will catch a few games. And if you don't know the name Audi Crooks, definitely look that one up. AUDICROOKS, Audi Crooks, absolute baller. But yeah, Tottenham pissed me off. I think ultimately, maybe why I'm just a little bit more frustrated than some, and I know you're also frustrated, but each and every year I expect progression, and when I see us come out and drop 2 points against easily the worst team in the league, who is up against the negative point deduction hill to climb, right? It's just unacceptable, and it's just the absolute worst way that you can start a season that we should be really hopeful about. And again, it's one match. We drew the first match of the season last year, and we went on a tear, and we're top of the table 10 matches in. So again, it's one match, it's a draw. But what I didn't see was a team that walked into the King Power and said, we are 10 times better than you, and we're going to fucking destroy you today. And that's what I expect from Spurs at this point. And we didn't see that. Now, I think the players can be held quite responsible, of course, right? They were on the field. I have a few questions about the lineup that Ange picked. I do think when I look at a Pop Star who had a poor preseason at best, right? And I look at Sarr's characteristics or primary attributes, we could say. It's busting up play, it's tracking back, it's running your ass off box to box and just causing havoc and letting the guys around you really operate and create. I don't know why you need that profile against a Leicester City yesterday, who again was just, when you compare personnel, absolutely just nowhere near our level, right? So I don't know why you need Sarr in that match. What you do need is a guy like Kulisevsky or a guy like Bergvall who can help pick locks and break down a low block from that central midfield position. Neither of them started. We saw what a James Maddison can do, and if we would have had dual James Maddisons, which I think Kulisevsky and Bergvall can do, I think there's a much better chance that we win that game. Now we did miss chances. Solanke missed a couple sitters. I do not berate him. It was his very first match, and I think that was the best spacing and positioning that I've seen from a striker at Spurs since Harry Kane departed, right? So it was really refreshing to see a true 9 understand his responsibility on the field, right? And I think that's why he got a couple of really good chances that should have been taken. That comes. So we easily could have won the match yesterday, but I think the more chances we create, obviously, the better chance we have of actually doing so. And so I think the decision to start Sarr was just questionable at best from Ange Postecoglou. So while I hold the players responsible, I think Ange could have done a better job yesterday as well.
I hear you, man. Get to turn a new page, though. Get to come back home, face this Everton side. I take it that you'd be pretty confident. I'm pretty confident that this could be 3 points in the book, especially with a home match. I'm sure the fans will be rip roaring and ready to go and welcoming some of these new players. Confident going into Saturday, I'm sure.
I am. I hope this isn't terribly reactionary, but I'm not as confident as I would like to be. And that's just because, again, I don't know what we do against an incredibly low block, who, again, like James just told us, is going to counter press. We really struggle against a counter press. tremendously. We did all of last season as well. A team that blocks up, but is willing to counter press is a massive challenge for this side, dating back to again the start of last season, or we call it Game 11, right, of last season. So I have some concerns. I don't think our wingers will be effective against this Everton side, just as I don't think they were yesterday, right? There's times where I look at Heung-Min Son, and you and I have talked about this ad nauseum over the past 4 years at points in time, right? But Sonny's best performances are against top 6 sides, and the 2 seasons where he absolutely balled out and hit 20 plus goals were Mourinho and Conte, where we were counterattacking. He's
Right.
very good at that, right? What he's not very good at is breaking down a block with one-on-one attacking wing play, right? He's never been that guy, other than his bangers from 20, 25 yards out, right? Which I would have liked to have seen him take a couple of hits yesterday. So
But how long's it been since we've seen one of those too?
been a little
So,
while. I agree
yeah,
with you. It's
that's
a good
the
point.
thing. Yeah, the thing that James pointed out though too is that Everton's lack of a right back may be helpful to Son, perhaps
It
getting
will
a little loose. So
it will help. I mean,
we'll have to see.
yeah, he's gonna have better legs than Seamus Coleman or Ashley Young for sure. So I take your point and see it well. But yeah, I do have questions as to where the creativity comes from, and I do have questions about our ability to stop them on the counter. I mean, Van de Ven and Romero both, but primarily Van de Ven bail us out over and over and over again. And at some point, something gives. I think I also look at the fact that I really can't ever trust a Postecoglou side to put up a clean sheet. It's super rare, right? And when you can't put up a clean sheet and you can't take your chances, it's kind of a recipe for disaster. So I'm confident, but I'd be more confident if I thought that we had wingers who could beat their man one-on-one and we were going to take our chances, because I think those are the two things that we're missing. I'll also say, with regards to the taking of the chances, I think Solanke will get that sorted out pretty quickly for us. But I just, again, wonder, what the problems will be that stem from the wing play and what we're lacking right now. So we'll see.
Fair enough. We will see at the weekend match Saturday against Everton at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. That's going to do it for us. Scott is at Scott G Bird. You can follow me at A Stetka. Follow us at Tottenham Depot. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. That is where you will get all these preview episodes throughout the season. We will talk to you on the podcast at the weekend. That's going to do it for us. As always, come on, you Spurs.